Trade deadline is coming up and it's time to decide. Should your team be a buyer? Should they look at selling? How should you be evaluating your team's assets? Let's talk about how most teams and fans assess their assets incorrectly at the trade deadline. First things first, we have got to talk about being a buyer versus being a seller versus, I guess, standing pat. In what instance should you be a buyer, be a seller, and when should you stand pat?
Yeah, like I think my thing is that you need to have a strategic vision for like several years in advance. And the whole idea of being a buyer is not that you go all in for 1 year, like, and never have traded to buy before or after that. Like, I think there should be a window of time where you are planning to buy, maybe some years more than others, but there should probably be a 3 to 5 year buying window followed by a 3 to 5 year selling window followed, and like the continuous sine graph for lack of better terminology, right? So I think that is the ideal situation for GMs to be in. But obviously, like, as you and I are both Jets fans, like, you can look at this year, for example, two signings in October changed the way that their year could have gone. They could have turned into crazy sellers this year, but now are going to turn into crazy buyers, right? So I understand that it's not that linear. But I think that's kind of the curve that teams should aim to follow when it comes to buying versus selling.
Yeah, like for me, like I think the big thing is, the term that we always talk about is the window, and really kind of assessing if you really believe that you truly have a window. I'm glad you brought up the Jets because exactly, like it was such a swing year for the Jets of deciding whether or not they were going to be buyers versus sellers. Clearly, they showed some sort of confidence in this group despite the way everything went last year with the wheels falling off. And for a good reason. When you have the best goalie in the world, you pretty much you should have a window unless you're actively trying to sabotage that. You should have a window. So with the Jets, it really came down to assessing if they really think that they can go for it, and then looking at, all right, do we have the pieces around those guys? Should we be buyers? Should we be sellers? And then, approaching the trade deadline, obviously they've already made their one trade, showing that they're really going to try and go for it this year, which is probably the right idea, considering, you only have so many years of having a guy like Connor Hellebuck on your team, and Mark Scheifele at their prime. But of course, we'll discuss that a bit later. I want to talk about, in general, the concept of buying and selling and standing pat, because I know that you and I might not agree exactly on when a team should stand pat. A couple of years ago, the Jets kind of did a bit of this, a bit of that in regards to selling on Andrew Kopp, but also kind of trading for Mason Appleton, trading for Zach Sanford, which I would consider a stand pat move, despite the fact that they both bought and sold. In what instances do you think that standing pat is the right move?
I am team Stan Pat, and obviously you can preface this conversation by saying, "Oh, it's contextual." It's always contextual, so that doesn't really matter. But generally speaking, right near the end of your coming out of a rebuild window, I am comfortable with a team standing pat. You've accumulated the assets. You have some young pieces that are going to be, your core, your future. That's going to be really strong in about 3-4 years. Like, if that's your goal, you have a bunch of these really good 21-year-old kids or whatever like that, and you're looking to hit that window in a couple of years, maybe you can trade. If you have a couple of those, like, bargain contract 29-year-old wingers that would net you a lot, go for it. But I'm okay with the team holding on to those guys because, again, a Stanley Cup team is not going to just be strictly 25-year-olds. It's going to have some up, some down, and all that good stuff. But a team coming out of its rebuild window that's not quite in the buying situation yet and has used a lot of the assets that they've accumulated because they were collecting draft picks for that window of time, I'm cool with that team kind of hanging 10 for a little bit. If they don't have a lot of super valuable pieces on their current roster, that will not be helpful in 4 years from now.
Yeah, like I agree with you, but at the same time, it's like I look at, and I think I'm going to bring the Leafs up as an example, because I feel like they are in my team this year where I look at and I go, maybe, like, because right now they're kind of in this weird spot where they are not as good as they expected to be. Obviously, you have the big four. You've got they've got plenty of reason to believe that they are in the middle of their window. So obviously you're not going to go out and just completely sell the farm, sell on everything. But that's a team I look at and I go, okay, very clearly, in my opinion, this is not going to be their year. I don't think this is going to be their year unless they make some crazy big swing at the deadline here. So in my opinion, like I look at guys on their team, like I know Tyler Bertuzzi is a UFA at the end of the year. Max Domi is a UFA at the end of the year. I mean, who else? They've got some TJ Brody, Mark Giordano. Like those are guys where I look at this team and I go, okay, do you think that those guys are going to be part of next year's attempt to go for it? And I go, maybe, maybe not. So maybe this is a good time to recoup assets for those guys, despite the fact that, this is a team that definitely they're still in their window. They still have got Matthews. They've still got Marner. They've obviously got William Nylander re-signed. This team is a team that I would expect to just kind of take a step back this year and, it didn't work out this year. The signing of John Klingberg, the signing of Ryan Reeves may not have been exactly what you were hoping for. But this is an opportunity for them to recoup some assets and therefore, have some cookies in the cupboard to trade at next year's trade deadline. Or if you really think that, maybe this is their year and they just need a little bit of, firepower, a little bit of some backup, then go for it. They've still got some picks. I mean, I personally, if I was the GM of the Leafs, if I was Brad Treliving, I wouldn't be doing that. But I personally am just so against doing nothing because what's the point? What's the point of going into the playoffs as the Leafs and not making a single trade for anyone, not trying to go for it, but then also keeping these players?
No, I understand in that instance the whole idea, like for the Leafs, for example, like right now, what should have been Kyle Dubas's plan is like this is the 5-year buying window. But then, like you said, you can make the decision come February, and you're like, okay, not this year. I'm not going to sell off the few valuable draft picks or prospects that I do have. I'll hang on to those for next year, which is still within that 5-year window. I fully understand that if you have that window, you don't equally trade and buy in all 5 of those years. There are certain years where you'll, go a little harder on that. But I think if your team is full of young players, like for example, like maybe New Jersey would have been a good example a couple of years ago, like with a bunch of young guys and a couple of older guys. I don't know their like 2021 roster by heart, but like if they had like no pending UFAs or even guys who are like pending UFAs, but they were like 29 years old and they wanted to extend whatever, but they also had some young pieces that they know are going to be part of their core in their 2023 to 2026 ideal window or whatever like that. Like I'm okay with them doing nothing. I really am for a year. Like I don't think a team should be stand pat or do the Jets Galaxy brain stand pat where you buy a bit and sell a bit. I'm not a fan of that regularly, but I do think that there are certain situations in which if it's part of kind of the grand scheme of things where, you buy really intensely and then you buy a little less and buy a little less, don't buy it all, sell a little, sell a bit more, sell a ton. Like I'm okay with having that limbo year for a team if it makes sense and if they don't have pieces that are going to expire and turn into zilch for asset return.
Yeah, and also and also to your point too, like I guess to concede a little bit too, like any sort of trade you do, any sort of selling that you do can affect the room, can affect the vibe of everything too. So I get that, but I'm purely I have the NHL GM mode or NHL 24 GM mode brain where I just look at a guy and I go, are you part of the solution for right now? And I go, no, okay, what can I get for you?
But I mean, even within the buyers and sellers kind of labels, it gets more complicated than that too. And I think the one thing that drives me absolutely crazy is when a team is either a buyer or a seller. Maybe I'll start with the seller end on this because we're going to talk a lot about buyers today. But when you're a seller and you're like, oh man, like sell them off, like our future looks so good. Like for example, if it were the Jets this year, if you were this offseason being like, oh yeah, DiVincentis and Milic are going to be our goalie tandem of the future, Rucker McGrody's our captain, Colby Barlow is going to be a league sweetheart, whatever. And then you're like, oh, but I really like Nikolai Ehlers, so I want to keep him forever. It's like, no, like that.
I do
people. No, but he's the perfect example for Jets fans because a lot of Jets fans are so emotionally attached to him, and everyone gets very emotionally attached to their players and their prospects and all that kind of stuff. But if you're selling and you have a pending UFA who's not going to be a valuable asset to a winning roster in 5 years when that roster is supposed to be winning, get rid of him. It doesn't have to be this year because maybe you're the return isn't looking right this year. You're not desperate because he still has a couple years on his contract, whatever. But you can't be like, oh, but I want to keep him because I like him. And that sounds like it should be obvious, but you see it so often, especially with buyers, when they're like, no, we're not getting rid of this prospect because I like him. And I think that that's kind of what leads into our big conversation today, which is about asset value for contending teams. We put together a little exercise that we're going to go through and talk about. Basically, the sum of the argument is, what is this asset doing for me right now? And anyone who follows me on TikTok has known that I've talked about this a lot when it comes to asset value and all these different kinds of things. So what Brady and I are going to do is we're going to go through the different types of players that exist in the NHL. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the Winnipeg Jets as an example, and we're going to go through and assess the Winnipeg Jets assets. We're going to assess, this is a very general exercise to start, and then we're going to apply it to a roster that, we're familiar with. And then talk about what an asset assessment will tell you about your team and what you should be willing to part with and what holes you should be looking to fill. So yeah, how are you feeling about this, Brady? You ready to get rolling on it?
Oh boy, it should be a lot of fun. Let's get right to it.
Okay, so content warning, spreadsheets in hockey, just so you're warned. You can see here, we got a lot going on here, and I'm gonna give you a brief overview of what this is. So what I've done is we've put together a spreadsheet that includes individuals and the typical roles that they hold on a hockey team. So you can see that we have 6 different types of forwards, ones that fall more in the top 6, middle 6, bottom 6 types of roles, anything from like a defensive forward to a checking forward to a regular scoring winger, stuff like that. Kind of 3 tiers of defensemen with the first, second, third pairing, the goaltenders, as well as a couple different draft picks. Those draft pick values we've kind of assigned based on first round draft picks tending to be more on the scoring winger side of things, second, third round draft pick maybe being more like a second pairing defenseman, and then fourth and beyond guys being more of those checking or role type players. And basically what we've done, I read a couple of studies, did a little bit of reading before this, so it's not solely vibes based. There are some vibes, don't get me wrong. It's definitely vibe inclusive. We don't exclude vibes here. But just talking about when that asset as an individual, ignoring, who's better or worse than that player as an individual, when that asset reaches its maximum value to help you win right now. So like, Brady, do you want to go through, like, for example, the scoring forward trajectory? Like, what does that say about a player?
Yeah, so with scoring forwards, like you can this is your prototypical kind of blue chip prospect coming in to a team. These players tend to hit their peaks or get into their primes quicker than, say, the defensive middle 6 kind of forward, because they're just doing what is instinctual to them. They're going out on the ice and they're just putting themselves out in opportunities to to contribute to the team in the simplest way possible, with the least amount of nuance to it, which is putting the puck in the net or helping other players put the puck in the net. So this is your standard type of player who comes in, let's just say at 20, 21 years old, and now these players usually end up getting a little bit better treatment from the coach. They'll be sheltered and usually put in a spot to succeed, and as well as usually given players to play with that will help them on their journey to becoming the player that they can be. So an example like Cole Perfetti, for example, who is 21, I want to say 21 this year.
He just turned 22.
22. Perfect. So we, and he's already playing in the Jets top 6 right now. Obviously we'll get to the actual assessing of value of each Jets player. I don't want to jump ahead too much here, but that's a guy who you can look at and say, hey, he's already at the point where he's got, on pace kind of for around 30-ish goals, 25 to 30 goals, and kind of on pace to be, a 60 point player, 70-point player. I would imagine, once he hits his full peak, he'll probably be a guy who is point per game, I would say. Yeah, hopefully more. But right now he's about, let's just say, 80% of his value, or his potential output to the team. So that's why a scoring forward, for example, will be a little will hit their peak a little bit earlier.
100%. So like Cole Perfetti, for example, is a guy who's giving a lot to the Jets right now, but we are not seeing right now the best of what Cole Perfetti's development arc will produce at some point, kind of thing. So this is all very just general typecasting role players. And we understand that, guys sometimes are a little bit more gray than they are black and white with these types of labels, but this is more just like an exercise for just general conceptualizing. It's not supposed to be scientific by any means, but I think kind of the biggest, most important takeaways from looking at this, vast array of colors is that defensemen tend to hit their peak later than forwards do. And guys who play a more aggressive style of game, like a power forward, tend to fall off a little bit faster than someone who has a more sustainable style of game. Beyond that, it's a pretty intuitive exercise. Like this makes sense. Obviously, a player at 28 is better than a player at 38. And these are just the kind of curves that these individuals follow over the course of their career, depending on the type of player that they are. We have this starting in the D-2 year, so pre-draft year. And basically what this is that we're going to assign these curves to all of the assets that the Winnipeg Jets have. So what we'll do when we flip over spreadsheets to the one that we're actually going to use as a workbook here is we're going to start applying them to all of the Winnipeg Jets assets. So for example, right now, a 2026 draft pick for the Winnipeg Jets is in its 0th percentile of impact on the Winnipeg Jets winning a game right now, because who the hell is that guy? He's not doing anything to help the Winnipeg Jets right now. Still an asset that's going to have a value at some point down the line. And same thing as how there are some players that are a little bit older on a roster that were valuable at one point, but aren't as valuable right now as they were some time ago. They kind of all follow these curves. And what we'll do when we switch over the sheets is we're going to start applying them and then see what's going on right now in the year of our Lord 2024 and how it's looking for the Winnipeg Jets.
Alrighty then. So now we can see here, we've got our spreadsheet up. We've got our assets for the Winnipeg Jets. And we're just going to go
for this.
Oh boy. We're just going to go through them, and we're going to kind of assign to them, what category they fall into, and then obviously apply their, value curve, as we have called it, to that player to kind of see where they're at currently at the moment. So obviously we're going to have to start off with the top 6 scoring forward. Lyss, who's the first player you want to place into that category?
Let's go Mark Scheifele. Let's start at the top on both of them, and what we're gonna do, you can see with the blue column, we got his draft year, and as you'll remember from the previous sheet we were showing you, they start 2 years before the draft. So Mark Scheifele, 2011 there. Let's do you agree with me? Can we copy paste?
Yes,
scoring
absolutely.
forward?
Yeah,
definitely not a two-way. There's our boy. So love. I knew it was gonna do that eventually, but as you can see, like Mark Scheifele. Ideally in his career, we understand that this player is a bit more nuanced, as everyone is, but for example in 2013 Mark Scheifele was on the Winnipeg Jets and he was good, but he hit his peak. Look at that, 100% in 2018.
I was about to point that out.
Perfect.
100% 2018. Perfect. What do you have, like 11 or 14 goals? I can't remember what he had in that one playoff run. No, he was absolutely bonkers, but
he was supposed to set records.
Yeah, but it also makes sense that we look now, he's at the 70% mark. That makes sense. He's kind of on the downtick. I don't know if he'll fall off as quickly as 50% next year, but again, this is a general curve, obviously. He's still putting pucks in the net and getting a lot of assists, so he will still be...
theoretically, he's extended up until when he's at 0% in 2034, but you know what? That's okay.
We'll get there. We'll get there eventually.
Yeah. So that's kind of the general curve. I'm fine with this, like we were saying. Especially, I think with these scoring forwards, the ones who are like elite, and I know a lot of people dunk on Mark Scheifele, including myself sometimes, but Mark Scheifele is an elite hockey player. The elite kind of defy the laws of what they're supposed to do. I think the average age for an NHLer to retire is like 30 or something like that. And we know that anyone who's ever made more than $8 million in their career probably is not going to fall off the same way that others might, he's going to be valuable for longer, same way that, like a Sidney Crosby defies the laws of age and all that good stuff. So maybe that's just me trying to like cover my ass with how this isn't perfect, but we're going to fill it out. We're going to go through it anyway. Even if he's not 0%, then he's sure as heck not going to be as effective as he was in 2018. So let's go.
For sure. Next player, I'm going to go with Kyle Connor. Do we want to do these in batches or do we want to go player by player?
Well, why don't the Winnipeg Jets have a lot of scoring forwards right now, and I still have this copied to my clipboard. So let's keep it rolling. Is Kyle Connor a scoring forward to you,
Kyle
Brady?
Connor is a top 6 scoring forward to me, along
that
with
bad boy in there.
for sure, along with many other players on the Winnipeg Jets, which we will chat about shortly.
So just keep it rolling. Let me know who else.
All right, Gabe Vilardi.
Scoring forward.
Nikolai Ehlers.
Scoring forward. We're gonna keep it rolling.
Sean Monahan.
Scoring forward.
Bit older, but still scoring. Was a top 6 scoring forward. Cole Perfetti. Scoring what? What do you got to say?
I want to call him a two-way forward.
He's a top 6. What are the 2 options for the top 6 again? I don't have them in front of me.
Scoring in two-way.
Perfect. Well,
brought to you in part by Patrice Bergeron. I was like, you can't put him in the same category as some of the others who are top 6 forwards. Special.
Of course, I think that he fits into that as well too. But I think I'm good with either. I still think he's a scoring forward. He's going to be one of the. He's a guy who's a scoring forward who's also
a scoring forward too. And I just think it's not fair to how smart he is to put him in the same category as Kyle Connor. I really don't.
Well, I mean, hey, I'll let you be the judge. It's your spreadsheet, so I'll I'll let you be the one who pastes the values in. Do we have any other scoring top 6 forwards? We could jump all the way down to some of the prospects if we really want to, or we can save those for after.
We'll do the prospects in a bunch. We'll go with their active players right now and then start looking at the other goofy assets they have.
Perfect. Alrighty. For me then, the next player do you want to go? Do you want to go? I'll let you take it if you want.
I really didn't want to take this one because I really wasn't sure. So Nino Niederreiter, I want to call him a power forward. How do you feel about that?
I would agree with that. I would definitely agree with that. And also the thing is too, like players as they evolve, like players evolve. They're not always going to stay as, scoring forwards. I would say Nino Niederreiter was maybe at one point a scoring forward, but I think that power forward definitely fits the archetype of who he has been for his career. He's always been a middle 6 guy. He's never really totally taken the reins as a top line guy. So I think middle 6 makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's been a conversation that a lot of the local Winnipeg media and stuff like that has talked about, is the whole, is his play going to fall off faster than others because of how hard he plays, for lack of better terminology, right? Which I think is always an interesting conversation. So, okay, Mason Appleton.
Appleton. Can I say it? He's a checking bottom 6 forward. That's all he is.
He is.
That's all he is. but for some reason we feel like maybe you got to play him the second line for some reason, or second line minutes. But anyways, that's neither here nor there.
Look at that, Mason Appleton is in his peak right now. Put some respect on his name.
It's good to know that this is the best he will ever be.
Oh god.
No, the best he'll ever be was like the 3 weeks.
Gift receipt, please.
The best he'll ever be was the 3 weeks at the start of the season, right? So,
straight up, yeah,
for sure. Alrighty, I'll let you take the captain.
Alrighty, the captain. See, this one, I'm gonna give him defensive middle 6 forward. I think is the category I want to throw him in. What do you think? I think
that fits. I think as his career has gone, at one point he was like one of the best third line centers in the league. It was controlling play on both ends of the ice. So I think that he deserves to be in that middle 6, even though he is getting a bit older now, of course. But yeah, I'm totally cool with that as well.
Yeah, no, and I do think it is like, and I'm not trying to disrespect Adam Lowry in any capacity, but offense does die on his stick a little bit when he's, away from guys like Nino Niederreiter. Last year we saw he went, I don't know what, like 50 games without scoring a goal or something like that. And I'm not one to lose sleep over that, but he falls in the defensive forward category to me. So You take the next one because I really don't know what the answer is to this. Vlad Nemestikov is the perfect example of someone whose role has changed over the course of his career. So I think
He's a defensive middle six.
yeah, that's what
Yeah,
you want to call
yeah.
him.
He's
Okay.
always been good defensively. Like that's always been one of his calling cards. Is that he is a defensively sound player, and that was one of the reasons why the Jets went after him initially. So I think that throughout his career, he's never really been a top six scorer. He's never really been I don't think power forward really fits his archetype. He's not a checking forward either. So I think defensive
No,
middle
yeah.
six guy fits exactly where he's kind of been all his career.
100%. Morgan Barron is a checking forward to me. What do you think?
I agree. Although I think he has middle six power forward potential, but
Yeah.
I think if we're being realistic, I don't know if he will ever get to that power forward level.
Yeah.
I think I'm comfortable putting him as a checking bottom six forward.
All right. Well, in he goes. That's our boy. About to hit his stride real soon. Okay. Excellent. Alex Iafallo. And also, just for context, for those of you watching at home, first of all, thank you so much for being here and watching us mess around with my Google Sheets. It's real fun. Alex Iafallo, you'll see, has a little asterisk beside his draft year because he does not have a draft year.
Ooh.
Got a couple of guys like that on the Winnipeg Jets right now. Notably, a couple of their main defenders are not drafted individuals, but we're just doing this for the sake of the game. The age he would have been drafted at. I'm not going to say that he started at the same level as someone else. When he entered the league at whatever 21 or whatever it would have been was not the same as an 18-year-old. Like there's a little bit of a difference there. So we're just going to say they follow the same curve. And it doesn't matter because we're not looking at this really in hindsight. We're looking at this for right now. So I do not care where Alex Iafallo was 5 years ago. I really don't.
Yeah, and with that said, where are you putting that guy?
You answer that because I don't know.
um,
Defensive forward?
I would say defensive middle six guy. Yeah, I would say that
Yeah.
he's kind of been that guy always. Maybe at one point in his career he was a two-way forward, but a two-way top six guy. But I think he's always kind of inhabited that middle six. I know that he's played top line in the past. Just because you played top line doesn't mean that's the player you are. A coach will give you your minutes how he feels, right? So
That's
yeah.
not right. Okay. Yeah, no, exactly. 100%. Okay. Excellent. David Gustafson. Is he a role guy?
I
What would you call him?
think so. I mean, at this point, when was he? He was drafted in
At this point,
2018.
yeah.
So what is that? He would be. Don't make me do math.
He's
He'd be
like
like 24,
23,
23,
20, yeah,
24, something like
24,
that.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, like I think this is kind of who he is at this point.
Truly.
At one point I would have loved to say that he was a defensive middle six forward, which I think he might still be able to attain that, but he's only really ever shown that he's kind of a role player. Which there's nothing wrong with that. You still make good money doing that. So and hey, we all love the Gus Bus here, of course.
Yeah, and it's nice to grow those guys in house too. I think that's a different piece. I feel like a lot of teams have to trade for their role guys, and it's like, hey, sometimes they're just your dudes, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I really
Rasmus Kapari.
yeah. I've taken the last two, so
Damn, I was really like. I think the thing that's hard is I made this exercise. I there's no one to fault. It's hate the player, hate the game. It's the same person at this point, but he doesn't really perfectly fit into any of these arbitrary boxes that I created. I want to say he's a checking forward. I think he has that speed, and that kind of that motor on him that makes me feel like he will spend most of his career in a checking sort of role, where you float between maybe a third checking line or a fourth energy line. I don't know. What do you think?
yeah, it's difficult for me because I think his skill set leans more towards being a bottom of the roster scoring player, but there isn't really, as you said, kind of a box for that because I think that he's based on the tools that he has, the speed, and the creativity that he has. I think he fits well into, and he's also a smaller player, so it makes me naturally not want to go that he's a checking forward. but I think that he fills the role. He fills a role on a checking line. And I think that will be his calling card.
And that's kind of more,
exactly
the point of this whole.
So I think I kind of look at him almost similarly to how I look at Morgan Barron, where I go, you have some tools that could allow you to be a more potent scorer, but I don't think that it's actually going to ever really come to a head. So let's give him the checking bottom 6 forward role.
Okay, I can live with that. Now our last forward of the day. I realized I didn't put like actually Janssen Fjallby on here, but you know what?
I mean,
he went on waivers. He's not even an asset.
It's not worth putting those players on here, you know.
Tony Nato's here anyway, so.
Well, I mean, hey, he's on the roster, so he's a role player. Very straight 100%. Up, simple, straightforward, and same thing would go for AJF, is he's a role player. Maybe.
I think the thing that's nice about this guy that I wanna give him some credit for is that there was a time as a Winnipeg Jets fan that every single role player that we had made me want to claw my eyes out watching them play hockey. He's probably one of the better role players. Like, I will take Mr. Dominic Tony Nato over Nick Shore any day of the week.
How about Par Lindholm? Did you forget that he played for the Jets?
I can never forget. I have like that date circled in my calendar from the day that he ruined Nick Patan's career for me. Par Lindholm.
Perfect.
Oh, okay. Now we're moving into the defensemen. So this is the these players all generally have a little bit of a later peak and all that fun stuff, and we'll go through. The Winnipeg Jets have been pretty consistent. They haven't had as much of a rotating cast of defensemen as they had of forwards this year, so I think we'll probably be able to fly through this pretty quick. Especially because for these ones, I didn't give them really roles. I know, for example, like a puck moving defenseman as opposed to a stay-at-home defenseman, but those are also, I think, some of them are stupid terms. I think ultimately we just got to look at top, second, third pairing and go from there. What do you think?
Works for me. Good for me.
That's the way she rolls. Josh Morrissey.
You wanted to take this one because it's the easy one. We don't have to debate about it.
No.
That is a top pairing defenseman, Josh Morrissey. If anytime you're in the conversation for the Norris, I think you should be able to attain the title of a top pairing defenseman.
Yeah, I think the conversation with him is more, is he a 1A? Because that's a piece that I think a lot of Winnipeg Jets fans have had a question mark around. I think Brady and I actually differ on our opinions on this. You don't think he's a 1A, and I do. Because I think that when it comes to a 1A, the ultimate way to look at it is, are there 33 better defensemen than you in the NHL? If the answer is yes, then you're not a 1A. If the answer is no, then you are a 1A. And that's how I look at it.
Here's the thing. I think that Josh Morrissey and Dylan DeMello are a great pairing together. And I look at both of those players and I go, who's the guy between the two of them? So I actually do believe that Josh Morrissey is a 1A. I don't think he's a star 1A.
No, because he's not Cale Makar.
He's no Cale Makar. He's no Adam Fox. But he's a player who, if you put him with, the right, a decent player, he will be very, very good.
I would carry a trash player. We watched him play with Tucker Poolman and Nathan Beaulieu for a season and a half. So,
but it did hamper his numbers, though. We have to admit that. It really
did. Yeah, no, he carried them not to elite results, but to passable results. But I think I don't know, even just watching him play sometimes when the Jets are playing like trash, I'm like, this is the one guy I feel like I can count on to pull them up a little bit, which is so nice to have. But the question mark for me now is about Dylan DeMello. Is Dylan DeMello a top pairing defenseman?
Yes, he is.
Okay.
I'll say it so you don't have to, because I know you have a bias here. Dylan DeMello is a top pairing defenseman. He is one of the best players.
Wait, what's my bias?
That you love him. That you are a Dylan DeMello stan. I am too, but not to the lengths that you do. And I mean, maybe to the lengths that you do, but I haven't made it as public as other people, as you have.
That's a really nice way to say that I'm a yapper.
Absolute waffler. But yeah, no, like Dylan DeMello is fantastic in transition. He is such a good complementary piece to Josh Morrissey. I think that it would be like looking at like I know obviously Dylan DeMello isn't a Devin Taves, but looking at Devin Taves and going, well, he just plays with Kale McCarr, so he has to be, that's
Yeah.
he should be a second pairing defenseman, but he plays with a really good one, so therefore he gets away with it. No, Dylan DeMello is a key part of why Josh Morrissey has been so good over the past 2 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that I actually don't remember what I was gonna say because you're right. I do just love him, and that is the whole thing. But I think results in spite of competition is really important to look at. Dude's getting hampered every single night with every single top pairing or top matchup that he could possibly get. It's like, here you go, 24 minutes, run it.
For
and
sure.
He does.
And he does.
That's my boy.
Oh boy,
That's my
he does.
star.
That
Neil
is...
Pionk. Second pairing defenseman. It's a second pairing defenseman, dude.
Is he? I'm sorry to say, is he?
I think he is. I think so. I think he is.
I'm willing to be charitable here and say at his peak, he was a second pairing defenseman.
Well, we're about to find out when his peak was.
Well, I guess so.
But yeah, I don't know. He is one of those players that to me, I think is just so awkward to watch. Oh, look at him. He's peaking right now. I think he's just such an awkward dude that I throw him in the Logan Stanley category of just like your mistakes look
so bad.
Horrible.
So
because
bad.
You're just an awkward looking dude. And even your good plays look not as good as they actually are because you're an awkward looking dude. I think obviously his metrics aren't great, but I do think he's one of those types of guys who suffers a little bit from the bias of eye test because yeah, he's just an interesting fellow to watch play hockey.
And also if you look at like kind of where he was as when he was younger, like I think that he had the art, like he was supposed to be a second pairing defenseman.
Yeah.
And obviously injuries obviously had a role here, but I'm willing to give him at his peak he should be a second pair defenseman, and he does play second pair minutes right now and is pretty decent results with obviously with Brendan Dillon, who is our next guy. Who I will take, and I'll say second pair. Like he is the prototypical, I think, career-wise, second pair. Maybe not at this moment as he is a bit older, but like that is a guy who I just remember. I have so many memories of going on to Daily Faceoff, looking at the Sharks, looking at the Stars, and just seeing that guy in that second pair role forever. That I think is exactly the player that he was supposed to be and became, and of course now is on the downturn, and it makes sense why. Maybe we look at him now and we go, hey, he's good, but he probably could be a third pair guy. Depends on what type of person you are, what you value. But I think that he fits the second pairing defenseman as to a T.
In putting this sheet together, I was surprised, but I shouldn't have been, to discover that he's the oldest player on the Winnipeg Jets, which is, again, one of those things that I can't believe a 2008 draft pick, or a would have been 2008 draft pick, is the oldest player on the Winnipeg Jets right now.
Yeah, it's
this
wild.
Man is, how old would that make him? 33?
Don't make
Something
me do
like
math.
that?
You should have put. You should have put
math
birth dates. I can't do math from draft year. Come on.
But yeah, no, that's just it's pleasing, that we don't have a 39-year-old plug, on every line anymore. It's great. On the other end of the age spectrum, we got Dylan Sandberg. Dylan Sandberg,
second pair,
second pairing defenseman.
He's a second pair defenseman. That man, that I know I love to glaze Dylan Sandberg, but that man, he will be a Jet for a long time and will be so solid. And the fact that he's not even at his peak yet, give it to me.
I almost gave up on Dylan Sandberg, dude. Like there was a couple of years ago, like maybe 3 years ago, like because people were high on him as a young prospect, and then the first couple of years of his development, like his D2, D3 year, we were kind of like, I don't know. I didn't think it was going to turn into much. I love when I'm wrong and it benefits my team. I don't care. I'll be wrong every day of the week.
Also, like I know this is really dumb, but Dylan Sandberg is just like, when I think of a defenseman, I'm just like, Dylan Sandberg is Like when I look at him, I'm just like, that's a defenseman. When I
No,
see his stature, the way he skates, the way he plays the puck, I'm like, that is a defenseman. That is a two-way defenseman. That is just like, that's my guy.
he's not a forward with a mustache and a hat on, like
Yeah.
straight up. He is a defenseman.
Like Neil Pionk,
Like, unlike
you could
guy.
argue that if someone just walked in and saw him playing and didn't see a position he was in, you could go, well, maybe that guy's a third line winger,
No,
no.
he looks like a checking forward. I feel like Neil Pionk gives checking forward.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Third line winger.
Okay. And I think Nate Schmidt might be a forward with a hat and glasses on. What do you think? Third pairing defenseman?
You know what? No. Nate Schmidt is a first pairing defenseman.
Shut up.
At his peak. No, at his peak. His projection.
Okay.
His projection. He was a first pairing defenseman for a long time. He is just old and has a bad contract.
Yeah.
Honestly, even like last year and the year before, he was putting up numbers like a first pairing defenseman while playing in lower minutes. So
no, that's a really good point, because I think that was the Sean Monahan conversation that we were having before. We're like, oh, like he's a middle six scoring forward. It's like, yeah, now because he's old.
Yeah.
But like that wasn't the career trajectory that he followed. He's just on the downturn of the top six scoring forward thing. So yeah, you're right. You're right. That's our boy. And it makes sense. Yeah, because he's sitting at the 70th percentile now. I think
I am the number one Nate Schmidt defender. I don't care.
You are.
I if he didn't make $6 million, no one would give a shit, and I stand by that.
No, you're right. Okay. Next, Connor Hellebuck. Just kidding.
That's tough. That's a real tough one.
No, I was joking. Did you not see that I skipped one?
Oh, I actually didn't see that you skipped one.
I was just gonna leave it zeros across the board.
Is there a depth? Is there a seventh D? Is there a press box tier?
No, because if they're press box tier, they're not an asset, and that's the category that I would throw our boy in, to be honest with you. But
and if it was press box tier, we'd be talking about a different defenseman who we'll get to eventually.
I was gonna say, yeah, but that was my thing with the AJF, right? Is that this is about assets. It's not necessarily about players or whatever. And if someone has passed waivers 6 times in the last 3 years, Dominic Toninato, I don't know if I would even consider that person to necessarily be an asset when we're talking about trade deadline conversations, because
he's a guy. He's a guy. He's a contract. That's all he is.
As is this guy. However, you cannot teach size.
You cannot teach size. You can't teach size. CTS, welcome. Hey, they said it. They did the thing. They said the lines. All right. Do you want to just put Connor Hellebuck as starting goalie and Laurent Brossoit as a backup goalie? Simple and straightforward as that.
Yeah. That's pretty much. I don't think there's much of a conversation to be had there. Neither of them fit into the other category whatsoever. So we'll run with it.
I completely missed Stanley.
Look at our boy.
I refuse to believe that Stanley will get better, to be honest with you.
No. But also though, to be fair to him, how could he? Like, he doesn't play. He just hangs out. Look at this. Our goaltenders in their peaks. Beautiful.
You love to see it.
Beautiful.
Although here's the thing, Logan Stanley could really benefit from going to a team like Chicago or like Philly, where he could just be a guy and play.
A 6'7" guy and play.
When are we going to trade him? I'm sick of this shit. Anyways, let's continue on. Let's get into the prospects.
This is where it starts to get really interesting, is we're going to have to start looking at these players and just guess. We really will, because we don't know a lot about them yet. But I do think that as far as blue chip prospects, like you were kind of talking about earlier, a lot of these guys who I consider to be assets that the Jets could actually do something with, whether it means, bring them up to play, kind of doubt it, or more likely trade them if need be. Most of these guys, I want to say, all of them probably top 6 scoring forward. What do you think?
No, I would disagree. Not all of them.
Okay.
Not all of them. No. Let's go one by one, because Rutger McGroarty to me,
power forward.
No, I would say two-way top 6 forward.
Two-way top 6. Okay, I can, but is he a defensive guy?
I think so. I'm just gonna assume based on the vibes we've been told. I think that he's a two-way guy. I would imagine, because he wasn't a guy who had like crazy numbers until this year for scoring. I think he fits the two-way archetype perfectly.
Sure. All right, let's vibe with it. Okay, Nikita Chibrikov.
Uh,
What are we thinking?
I think that that's a middle six power forward.
Yeah,
Um,
I could rock with that too. Yeah.
I think that that's kind of his ceiling. And really, this is all we're really saying. Like, what's their ceiling?
Yeah.
What do they
No, for
kind of
sure.
project to be?
That is the intention for sure. Okay. Very cool. And then now we're rocking with Brad Lambert. That's a scoring forward. You
That
can't
is
convince me
that is a
otherwise.
scoring forward,
I don't think you would even
120%.
try to convince me otherwise.
Nope.
Yeah. No, for sure. Alrighty. Chaz, same deal.
Yeah. I mean, I think at this point he's closer to a middle six guy. Like, I don't know. He's tough. I think let's give him the scoring top six forwards type of thing, but he's just a guy who hasn't been turning out. So that 60% is a little off because obviously, it's not a always thing. It's just a general thing.
And I am very close to wanting to put him into a Nick Batan category. It sounds awful, but he's the type of player. He is a top six scoring forward. I just don't know if he's going to be good enough at being that.
I don't know if he's going to get to be able to develop like that. It's purely development thing, and it's been hampered by injuries. So in an ideal world, when we drafted him as a scoring top six forward.
Exactly.
To maybe like a middle six scoring forward, but
if he has to play a role other than that, I don't think it's gonna work.
No, exactly. All right, you want to do this one, Lyss? You want to talk about this guy?
No, there's nothing to talk about. Top pairing defenseman, copy paste.
No, I will not allow you to do that. I'm sorry, he's not. He's a second pair defenseman. He's a second pair defenseman. And he will. I'm sorry to say, Lyss. I'm sorry. I love him, and I think that he could very much help the Jets. You have to put him as a second pairing defenseman. Do it. Copy it. Paste it. You have to.
If I copied the top pairing and pasted it, would you even know? They follow very similar trajectories, dog.
I think you just got. I'm sorry.
I know. But look at this.
He's still at 50%.
So much ahead of him. So much to look forward to.
And now, Elias Solomonson. Lyss?
I think he's also a second pairing peak guy.
Yeah, I would even say top. Like, I think that
Shut up! Billy Heinola is not a top pairing.
Not anymore. I'm sorry to say, he's not a top pairing guy. He's not. Whereas Solomonson has shown that he can play top pair minutes, and he's playing already in Sweden.
In Liga, guess who also did that, bro? Like, come on.
I'm sorry. We have more knowledge of Billy Heinola and where he's at right now. I'm sorry.
I think Elias Solomonson is also a goon. Like,
listen, if I ask you who is more likely to play top pair minutes for the Winnipeg Jets, and I ask you
Billy Heinola,
I'm saying not necessarily right now. I'm just saying ever. I don't know about that. I'm sorry to say I don't know about that.
I think we should leave them both as second pairing defense.
Okay, that's fine with me. That's fine with me. I'm just high on Solo.
He's a goon. He keeps getting suspended, dude. I don't know what is up with him. But okay, last one. Colby Barlow.
Colby Barlow.
Where are you at?
I'm between scoring top six and power middle six.
Ooh, I was between two-way and power. So
let's just do power. I think that we all had a little copium after that pick. Where we all were like, oh my God, look at his shot. But like, let's be honest here, guys. I think he's a guy who is probably a middle six forward. And that means he can play in the top six if he's a middle six guy. I just don't think that he's going to be a top line winger for the Jets ever, personally.
Yeah, no. 100%. Alrighty. And now we're into the draft picks. So what I'll do is we'll just go with the trajectories that we left for them before. We'll do a little cut the cameras, take a little intermission so that you guys don't have to watch me control shift V everything. And then we'll start doing our assessment. What do you think?
Sounds good. Let's do it. All right, so now we completely have our table filled out. We can do a nice little assessment of the Winnipeg Jets right now, kind of what their window is really looking like, and where the players' values are at based on kind of their general category that they fit into. Lyss, How you feeling?
Apparently tired, I guess. I don't know. Looking at all these numbers. But
It's a lot
I
to take
think
in.
there are a couple things that, obviously make a lot of sense to me. Like guys like Gabe Vilardi, Connor Hellebuyck, and Josh Morrissey, some of the key players in the Jets right now being at their peaks is obviously very exciting. And we can see, if we just like general snapshot, the Winnipeg Jets probably, based on active players, their window was 2019 to now. Like to me, right now, looking at this roster, they should be on their way out of a window and not on their way in. What do you think about that, as someone who knows this team very well?
Yeah, like for me, it's like I would agree with you that maybe their window started previously, but I think that at this moment right now, they are still well within that window. And the reason is because you still do have like just looking, okay, let's go position by position. So forwards, you can already see right now the players who are considered in the Jets top 6, the Scheifele, Connor, Vilardi, Ehlers, Monahan, Perfetti. Those are all players who are at I would say
Like
totally.
max effectiveness.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like obviously Shifley is probably on his downturn. I think the 70% is a little harsh. I think he will,
Yeah.
but it is what it is. The curve we have isn't exactly perfect for every player, obviously. But Kyle Connor's still a very effective scorer. Gabe Vilardi is really coming into his own. You still got players, you've still got first line caliber players in Nikolai Ehlers, who's playing in the could be considered in the second line for forwards. But then also at this, on the tail end of things, you've still got, Adam Lowry still has a lot left to give. Mason Appleton is probably at his peak right now. Maybe he's not the ideal player you have on the Jets, in that bottom 6. But regardless, we still see that the Jets don't have many players who are really falling off at this moment. And then really the big bright spot for me is the defense. Like you look at, Josh Morrissey, peak right now. Neil Pionk, peak right now. Dylan DeMello, still right near his peak. And then you have guys who are still coming into their own. Dylan Sandberg has shown that he can still play in those top pair minutes when it's thrust upon him. And hey, it's a luxury to be able to play that guy at third line minutes. You have Nate Schmidt, a previous, top pairing guy, being relegated to the third line minutes. And those two guys have been great together. And then, hey, just look at the goalie stats. Look at the goalie stats here. We have Connor Hellebuyck, still at his peak in another Vezina caliber season. I still think that while I do agree with you that the Jets window started, back in 2018 or so, they're still in it right now. Yeah, rest in peace.
Yeah, no, and I think the two most important pieces that you kind of identified were, well, like the first is a caveat that like this team didn't look like this in 2020. You can't just, select the column 2020 and be like, oh, this is what the team looked like. They didn't have a lot of the same defensemen, and Gabe Vilardi wasn't here, and Cole Perfetti was, like these weren't players that they had active in that year. So it's not like you can just go back in time like this. This isn't supposed to be a hindsight exercise. And the other thing is that, right now, for example, a team that has 6 players, or say you have 2 teams, each have 6 players that are at their 100% right now. If one team, it's their top 6 forwards, like the Winnipeg Jets is here, and one, it's their bottom 6 forwards. Those are very different situations to be in. Doesn't really matter, to be honest with you, if, you have one fourth line player that's at his 100% right now. Like it really matters where your core guys are at. And I think you made a good point by identifying, Josh Morrissey, Connor Hellebuyck, and basically the entire top 6 of the Winnipeg Jets. The fact that they're all at the very best that they can be right now is a very good indicator that this is a window that the Winnipeg Jets should be trying to compete in.
Absolutely. And hey, the results speak for itself. Despite recent issues, which we're not going to talk about, they've still been one of the best teams in the season this year. Their 5v5 numbers are incredible. Really, they just need to figure out a couple things, and I'm sure they're getting ready for a run. It should be, there's a lot of potential for some really fun stuff to happen here in Winnipeg in the, as the summer comes around.
So I think what the point of this exercise was, though, is now to look at, I think we're not innovative for diagnosing the Winnipeg Jets as a contender right now. This is, common news, common knowledge within the league. The point is now to look at their roster and what these assets are doing for them right now, and then taking a look at what they should be willing to part with right now. Now, that doesn't mean that everything that they should be willing to part with, they should part with. But there needs to be a block of assets that falls into the category of being on the table. And this is where it starts to get a little bit, controversial among fans. Because let's say this was the beginning of the Jets window. This is a year that they're buying really aggressively and all these kinds of things. So let's say their window closes in 2029. Believe me, it's closing earlier than that. But let's say 2029 is when it closes. Now we look ahead at all these players that aren't really rocking in their primes or on their way ups until 2029. If you scroll down to where we get to the prospects and the assets, the Winnipeg Jets should have every single draft pick on the table. That's not super controversial. Not that I think they need to, pull a Leafs and fire off every single first round draft pick that they have and all these kinds of things, unless the fit is there. I think they just all need to be on the table. But they got a couple guys, the Colby Barlows, the Rutger McGroartys, the Nikita Chibrikovs, all these guys that are hitting that peak later. And in that window, they're rocking the 30%, the 50%, whatever. Those guys need to be on the trading block. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a certain level, I'm going to play the guy who has emotional ties to these players, because it would take a lot for me to want to trade a Rutger McGroarty. And I know that sticker price is, I would pay anything to win a cup. But here's the thing, you can't guarantee that you're going to win a cup just by trading for guys. So when I look at a guy like a Rutger McGroarty, I say, unless I'm getting something absolutely peak back, that's a guy who I even look at and go, maybe he might even potentially be on this roster by the end of the year playing a third line role. And I know that we have him listed here at 40%, but that doesn't mean that he can buck the trend. He can't buck the trend and come in here and provide incredible value for the Jets for, on an ELC. But I look at the other players and I go, okay, like, do the Jets really need a Chaz Lucius? Cover your ears, Lyss. Do the Jets really need a Ville Heinola? Cover your ears again. But so it's one of those things where I think that these, obviously you need to weigh out the price and everything like that. But as we can see here, like, the majority of these players here are going to give you no value for the Jets. Like, I know that we have Brad Lambert listed as 40% right now. There's no way that Brad Lambert jumps onto this team and it becomes, a value. I just don't see him this year becoming a valuable piece for the Jets in their run right now. The thing that you need to weigh with that is, okay, do we, let's go back up to the top here and let's look at the players. As we can kind of see that a lot of the players on the Jets are on, a bit of a decline. They're still doing well right now, but maybe they're on a bit of a decline. For me personally, it's weighing, okay, do we think that these prospects can come in and potentially lengthen this window? Or do we think that we have a specific, a best before date where as soon as we get to that point, it's pretty much gone? And for me, it's Connor Hellebuyck. Connor Hellebuyck is the key to the Jets window. You can say Mark Scheifele is part of that too, but realistically, we all know if we don't have Connor Hellebuyck, this is not going anywhere. So I look at a guy like Rutger McGroarty, and I think that he's a little bit closer than we may think. And so, I wouldn't want to necessarily, trade him immediately, because I think that even by the end of this season, if not next year, can still come in and provide some value for the Jets. But again, it's all about who's available. If you tell me Sidney Crosby is available and it's going to cost me Rutger McGroarty, I'm sorry, Rutger.
Get ready to learn Chinese, buddy.
I want to win a cup. So it truly is a trying to, determine what is worth, paying, because that Rutger McGroarty, he can either help the Jets or he can be something that, he can just be, fodder for a trade in order to make the Jets better.
No, and I think that's like, and so you galaxy brained it.
I'm
But you
sorry.
ended up back where I wanted you to be, which is that, yeah, you're willing to trade him for the right return. And that's how every asset needs to be. You shouldn't be willing to trade a 5th round pick if it's not for the right return. You know, all these things, like, it's all about what the value is you're getting back. But I think the thing that people just get so like their minds get so closed in on is when they're like, basically anything that's of value to them, they keep in their pocket and they say, no, I don't want to trade this guy. It's like, well, guess what? Sean Monahan, Winnipeg Jets just traded for him. He's valued by the Montreal Canadiens. There's value across the league with him as a trade deadline piece coming up. You can't just trade your trash for him. That's not how this works. And that's the thing that drives me crazy. The amount of packages I've seen that include Chaz Lucius and a third is absolutely ridiculous, because Winnipeg Jets fans think that they're like being sneaky about something, and they're like, oh, this guy is injury prone and I don't know if he has a spot on the roster. Guess what? Everyone knows that. So you're not going to be able to trade him for some awesome piece that's going to help you right now. You need to understand that these value pieces that are valuable to you are valuable to other people too. And if your window is now, you got to be willing to part with them. So Rucker McGroarty, and the example that you gave, I understand that Sidney Crosby, but he's on the table. He's on the table, and he needs to be on the table. And maybe it's not for, you know, Sidney Crosby. Maybe there's a different fit that comes through it. And, you know, I would have been upset if the Winnipeg Jets traded Rucker McGroarty for Sean Monahan. Not because I care about Rucker McGroarty being on this team right now. I don't think that he's going to be an impact enough of a player for the Jets in what I consider to be their cup window, which is really this year and maybe the next two. So I'm not too keen on keeping Rucker McGroarty around if it means that the Jets are walking away from other assets that could move the needle for them. And I know you said that it doesn't guarantee that there's a cup win, and I get that, but I just don't see there being anything in the next little bit that's as close to right now. So I think they got to be willing to sell the farm and then go into my bottom below the X equals 0 sign graph, or sorry, Y equals 0, and go down and get into that rebuild that I know they'll never do. But they got to do that in 5 years from now, and they can't keep holding on to who was my first round draft pick, and keep them all, because they're never going to win a Stanley Cup if they do that.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, I know that I got a lot of heat for disliking the Monahan trade. And I think I clarified it on our last video, but just one more time. The reasoning for that is not because I was like, oh, I wanted the Jets to pick with that 1st-round pick.
Because I don't think Sean Monahan's that good.
No, yeah. It's just I don't think that he's worth a 1st-round pick. I think that it's, at the end of the day, the Jets still get better as a team, which is good. I think they paid a lot for it, but, you know, it's like, here's the thing. If you had $10 to your name and you needed to go get a meal, would you walk into the grocery store and you'd go and get, a piece of meat or some sort of, like something that you can cook as a meal? Or would you go and get a couple ice cream bars? And that's what I would say, is that, hey, a couple ice cream bars, Sean Monahan, is still going to feed you. It's still going to help satiate the fact that you're hungry, but
you're still malnourished.
But like, was it worth the money? With you only have a certain amount of money you can spend. You maybe
Yep.
could have looked elsewhere. Could have went to a different aisle.
Sure. Because now, if the Winnipeg Jets are unwilling to part with Rucker McGroarty or whatever, any of these things, and all of a sudden Sidney Crosby becomes available, and they're like, oh, we have a third for your consideration. Would you like David Gustafson? No, it's not happening. The Kyle Dubas isn't even gonna blink at you, right? Like, but if you had that 1st-round draft pick still, and then a couple other things, and if you're willing to part with Rucker McGroarty, now they're listening. Now they're picking up the phone, right? So I don't know. It's interesting, and I think what this spreadsheet shows us, firstly, is that it's all over the place, and every team always is. And what we'll do kind of to wrap up this episode is talk a little bit about some of the anecdotes of being a buyer of this spreadsheet and of how this whole process works. But I think it's just so important for people to understand that if your team is in a window, if an asset is anywhere from 0 to 30% of its max ability, because either it's old as dirt and sucks, or it's a child who's still trying to finish grade 11 biology, you can't cling to that thinking that, he was so good, or he will be so good. If there's a window, those pieces need to be on the table immediately. So like the point of this whole thing has been, I'm a visual learner. We need to visualize things. Take a look at where these players are at, where these assets are at, and understand that if the Winnipeg Jets believe that 2024 is the year that they should win, these are some things that they need to consider. Here are some holes that exist in the lineup based on the map that I made. But need to cover my own butt a little bit here, and let's talk a little bit about some of the anecdotes that exist here, some of the contingencies with the way that this exercise works. Like we were saying, it's very general, but it is conceptually something that makes a lot of sense. So the first thing I want to bring up, and I also want to give a shout out to Julian. Julian was a longtime Game Over listener. We still chat with him on Twitter and stuff like that, who when I was originally posting about asset value and stuff like that, he brought up a really good point that I do think needs to be considered, and that's the cap efficiency of certain players and when it comes to this sort of curve. So I think, for example, Brady brought up Cole Perfetti way early on before we even started the exercise, and I'm gonna bring him up again. Where Cole Perfetti might be sitting right now at his 60%. And if you were to look at the top 6 forwards, he's probably the one who's on his lowest part of the curve. So maybe by that logic, he's one of the ones that you consider trading. But if we think that Cole Perfetti's 100% is, say, being, best case high ceiling scenario, a 90-point player, him being a 60 percentile right now is him being like a 50, 55-point player, right? So he's doing that, which is still valuable. How much are you spending for each of those points, which is a super important thing. Guys on their ELCs, I think, are really important to kind of consider in the back of your mind for this sort of thing too, where if the guy is still being impactful, maybe not to his absolute highest degree. I'm talking about Cole Perfetti. I'm not talking about Rucker McGroarty, right? Like a guy who's actually currently impacting your lineup for $775,000 or whatever the young players is making at that time. It's really important to kind of keep that in mind and understand the value that brings for your cap efficiency.
Oh, 100%. Like I think you hit the nail on the head there. And even going back to the discussion around Sean Monahan, probably one of the reasons why his price was so high was because he makes $2 million. And being able to add a centerman who, despite whatever, bad things we want to say about him, he's a PP merchant. He is bad defensively, blah, 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 this and that.
I would take any PP merchant right now.
That's true. Despite that, he's a player who only makes $2 million. And so that, again, allows the Jets to be able to maneuver and make other potential deals here, which I would imagine they're probably going to try and get something else at the deadline. So yeah, like absolutely. I think a cap efficiency is absolutely 100% so important to consider because you only have $84 million now, 83. I don't know. I can't remember what it is. It changes every year.
82 and a half or something. I can't even keep track of it. But yeah, no, 100%. That's super important. I think the other thing to look at too is just the untraditional curves and the things we're looking at. So like by the logic of this thing, for example, basically, if you wanted to say, oh, like for this window, I only want players that are between 50, like over 50% of like effectiveness or whatever. By that logic, you would not have anyone over the age of 36 in your lineup. I do not have the last 10 cup winner rosters and their birth certificates pulled up in front of me, but I would venture to say that all of them probably had guys over the age of 36 on them because not everyone fits into these boxes.
And also you can get, going back to your last point, you can get good cap efficiency on older players sometimes. Like it depends on the player, obviously. We're not talking Blake Wheeler on the last year of an $8 million deal, but maybe Blake Wheeler, at league minimum, I'm sure like that's a player who is much more valuable to the Rangers than obviously he would have been to the Jets. So absolutely.
100%. Yeah. And I also think that the other thing is with the untraditional curves. Like Mark Scheifele was the example that we looked at earlier, where theoretically, according to his aging curve, what is he at? I don't even have it pulled up in front of me anymore.
70.
But I think he's rocking 70%. That's not terrible. Okay, maybe a better example is Nino Niederreiter. Nino Niederreiter right now, according to this age curve, is at 40% of his impact. I think Nino Niederreiter is playing some pretty excellent hockey right now, even especially by his own standards and all that kind of stuff. I think he's lasting a little bit longer in this type of role. And part of that is because I think one of the things that you mentioned and you were better at holding us accountable to than I was that players' roles change over the course of their career. And if Nino Niederreiter was a power forward from day one, where he was being forced to play against every team's top line, hit all the time, kill penalties at the top of the circle, whatever, I could see him being closer to this 40 percentile, like, efficiency here than he is right now. But I think since that he spent a lot of his time as a middle six scoring forward and things like that, like his body doesn't have probably as much wear and tear on it as it would be if he was playing the style of hockey that he is right now throughout his whole career.
And obviously not every player fits in a box too. You know?
Well, that's the other thing for sure. And that is like, for example, by the logic of this spreadsheet, Mark Scheifele, Kyle Connor, Nikolai Ehlers, and Sean Monahan are all the same player. So true.
So true.
Like, like even just saying that, you can't even say that with a straight face properly, right? Like it's obviously not 100% true, but and we could theoretically, if we wanted to go through this and spend forever doing it, we could look at their past years and draw their own curves and what we project them all to be, because these players pretty well. I'm too lazy to do that. This is more just a conceptual exercise.
And also, sorry, I also want to like mention, like, one of the, I'm looking at it, one of the two of the three players that we have at 100% of their value is Mason Appleton and Dominic Toninato, and that's, again, just despite the fact that they're at 100%, it's like 100% is 100% of what, so
no, genuinely.
So again, it is really about, I think when you're constructing a roster going into playoffs, I think the roles of the player matter more, and then how much of that role can they fill. Mason Appleton is great at being a bottom six guy, I
love Mason Appleton at 11 minutes a night.
Yeah, exactly. And
do I get that? No.
I mean, hey, it is what it is. But either way, again, never will be a perfect exercise. We'll never be able to fully assess every single player based on this. But it's just good to give a general idea of saying, when you're trying to go for it, the point is you want your assets to try and line up and hit their peaks at the same time. And that's why you would want to go ahead, and why it's not as big of a deal to trade a Colby Barlow, Elias Solomonson. I mean, a little bit different because, we don't have any of that in the cupboard, but the point is, it doesn't matter what's in the cupboard, because you got to get things figured out for right now. The goal is to win a cup.
The cupboard is a good thing to bring up, though, and not cupboard as in like the 18-year-old cupboard, but the press box and AHL cupboard of right now, I think is a good thing to bring up too, where, you may have 8 forwards that are at 100% right now, which is great. But if they're all 8 of those particular forwards are checking forwards, and some of them are in the press box or playing roles that they shouldn't be in and stuff like that, that's an issue. It's same thing with like defensemen, for example. If you have, a bunch of, third pairing defensemen, or even second and first pairing defensemen that are at their best right now, if you're not utilizing that asset that's at its max value, then it's not doing for you what it needs to do. And that's the thing, that the Jets have some decent young-ish forwards, like David Gustafsson, for example, who's on the come up. He's not even playing right now. He's being wrongly held on the injured reserve because they don't have roster spots right now, so there's nothing wrong with trading a guy who's maybe a good asset right now, if there are too many people who are also at that max value in that same role. Or on the inverse, maybe you have all these guys who are doing great, and you have a bunch of guys at 100% and they're all playing, but if every single one of your scoring forwards is like over the age of 30 and is being, maybe 40% effective right now, you got to start looking into it. I don't care how great your bottom 9 is. I don't care how great your bottom 4 defensemen are or whatever. If you don't have people in that 100th percentile, like we are kind of talking about earlier, or the 90s, the 80s, whatever, in those really effective roles, like your goaltending. If you have all this great stuff, but you have no goaltending, then guess what? You're the New Jersey Devils and the Edmonton Oilers, and it's really Leafs. Tough and the Leafs, and it's really hard to, sustainably hold that window open for yourselves if you don't have those players who are at that max value in those impact roles. So I feel like that kind of covers it off of our butts, so people can't sue me for being stupid. But yeah, what do you think?
You know what? I think that this has been a long video. So if you're still here listening to us, I think it is about time that we wrap this up. So thank you once again for tuning in to Canty Shies. Let us know what type of content you want to see. We're trying new things out every day. seeing what really fits with us. We decided we'd try something a little more visual, a little more video style than the traditional podcast. But regardless, please do like the video, subscribe to us, follow us on Twitter. It's on the screen, obviously, and then also follow at Can't Teach Size. Do you have anything else you want to say before we depart here, Lyss?
I don't think so. I think hopefully you're not tired of seeing the colors red and green too much, and that you learned a little bit of something. This might have been very Jets centric, for lack of better terms, video here talking about how this impacts the Winnipeg Jets, but theoretically this exercise can and should be applied to every single team. And if you apply this sort of logic to your own team, if you are not a Jets fan, or if you just wanted to take a look at other teams, take a look at their assets, the TLDR, if you are in a window, be willing to trade your blue chip prospects and your picks. I don't know where I'm trying to go with this. And
you know what I'll say? Here, I'll save you. The statement you have to give is no half measures.
No half measures.
There you go.
Like that. Which maybe doubles down on your idea of not standing pat and me saying, well, maybe. No, you're right. No half measures. Go all in, be all out, follow the sine curve. The sine curve will do you well. And we'll see you next time on CTS.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.